Listen up. There's no more excuses. We're empowering those who want the hustle by exposing the status quo.
The days of ordinary are over.
It's time to crush mediocrity and start discovering your greatest potential.
Welcome to the Hustle Nation.
To the Hustle Nation.
To the Hustle Nation.
To the Hustle Nation.
Welcome back to another episode of the Hustle Nation podcast. Today, as always, we've got a real treat, but this one is special. Mr. Neil Patel is in the house. Neil, co-founder or founder of Neil Patel Digital. You may know him from anywhere you've searched the internet looking for marketing information, marketing insight. Neil is probably maybe the most famous marketer in the world. Neil, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
Yeah,
well,
glad to have
we're
you.
Excited to have the conversation. Neil, I just got to tell you this because we've never talked prior to this, but my first exposure to you was probably back in 2007, 2008, maybe sooner. But when I graduated college in 2005, I was a marketing major, but really they didn't teach digital marketing back then. I mean, there was very minimal things you could do in the digital realm. So when I was working in marketing, I was always going to Google and YouTube and trying to learn my way through, like, how can I figure out how to do SEO? How can I figure out how to do websites and social media, this brand new thing? And 7 times out of 10, I ended up on Neil Patel's website or on Neil Patel's YouTube page, learning from you. So I'm excited to have the conversation.
Thank you. You know, it was funny. I went through the same experience when I was in college. They didn't really teach much about digital marketing, yet that was the future. And a lot of the tactics and strategies were just old that we learned in school.
Yeah, for
No
sure.
doubt. So you've been doing this for a very long time and probably longer from the date range that I stated. Tell us a little bit more about your journey and how you got to where you are now, because as I've followed you, you've accumulated businesses. You have a lot of different softwares and services. Let's hear about your story a little bit, Neil.
Sure. So, serial entrepreneur. I focus all my energy these days on an ad agency called NP Digital. We're global. We have 1,000+ people at this point, and yeah, we have software divisions like UberSys, Answer the Public. The list goes on and on. And we just enjoy helping people grow their traffic.
That's fantastic. So how has marketing evolved, and not so much on the grander scale, but from a small business standpoint, how has marketing
Yeah.
evolved just over the last 20 years or so you've been doing this?
Oh wow, there's been a lot of changes. So I'll break down a few. First, it used to be when I first started, there was a lot of platforms to optimize for, like Looksmart, AltaVista, Yahoo, Google. And then it ended up becoming there's just a few platforms like mainly Google, maybe Facebook. And now the pendulum swung the other way, in which there's tons of platforms now again to optimize for. We find that the average social media user uses more than 6 platforms on a regular basis. So when you put that into account, plus the Chat GPTs, the Geminis, which people are searching and using to find products, solutions, companies, and even the traditional search engines. So that's one big change. The second big change that we've seen is when I started out, highly produced content. Think like Super Bowl, think like Ziff Davis, CNET, like quality, like just going above and beyond, did well. And I know those are different types of content. But then over the years, what ended up happening was we've seen a shift from the lo-fi content people just bust out their phone and just talk into it, does extremely well. And the reason I say that is it's authentic. It's more personal. People can relate to it. The third big change that we've seen is you used to be able to build businesses off of one country, and now you can't build a big company off of one country. You need to focus on being global. If you look at most of Fortune 500, I know that's the mark for companies here in the States. Majority of them are global, right? By far. Like Apple sells products overseas, Google UBUs overseas. Some aren't global. They're more so highly regulated. EX, JP Morgan, Bank of America, Wells Fargo. They do have banking relationships with other providers overseas, but banking is more on a country by country basis.
Yep.
But when you look at it overall, these days, if you want to do well, you got to think global first, not within your own country first. The other big change is there's just too much content. Roughly 4.7 billion pieces of content get published each and every single day at this point. In 2 days, that's more content than the amount of people in the world. When I first started, I met a lady who worked at Google at the time. Her name was Miley. Miley, brilliant girl, engineer from UC Berkeley. And she's like, Neil, the majority of the people in this world don't speak English. I'm like, Miley, I know this. This is common sense. English isn't the most popular language, right?
Yeah.
And she's like, no, I don't think you understand. The majority of the content on Google is in English, but yet the majority of the searchers are not in English. So then I was like, oh, okay. And she ended up breaking down to me. She's like, yeah, Google is craving content for other regions. And I started producing content for other countries, and traffic just exploded. It was really easy to get to like $5-6 million, 5-6 million visitors a month, not dollars, uh, for marketing related traffic in different countries. And then now there's so much content, it doesn't matter how much you produce or which countries you produce, they have a content overload issue, not a lack of content issue. But I would say those are some big changes that have happened over the years.
I love that about the language. I know I've heard Gary Vaynerchuk and a couple other big names mention the same thing. But you bring up a really good point with really quantity versus quality. I know that there's a fine line. There's a big debate with marketers about this. Having a podcast and being able to use AI like Opus Clip to chop it up and distribute,
Yeah.
dozens of pieces of content from every episode. What's your take
But doesn't
on?
work as well. And sorry to cut you off. It doesn't work as well. Like, it's not bad. Sometimes it's great, but a lot of times it just misses the mark.
That's true. That's true. But what's your take on the balance though between quality versus quantity?
It's no longer a quantity game. It's purely a quantity game. I mean, sorry, it's no longer a quantity game. It's purely a quality game.
Yeah.
And the reason I say that is, as I said, a few minutes ago, 4+ billion, 4.7-ish billion pieces of content being published a day. They have their choice. When you search on TikTok or Instagram, you know, you're only going to look through so many pieces of content. They're going to show you the ones that do really well. And this isn't just for search, because people are like, oh, there's only 10 results on page 1 and 10 on page 2. And they've kind of moved away from the page system depending on the platform or search engine. But similar, people don't really go past like 20, 30 results. Usually don't even go past 10. And when you look at these social platforms, we did an analysis earlier this year. We analyzed a bit more than 5 million posts on social media. The ones you see tend to be the ones that are getting somewhat engagement. 58-ish% of the content, I'm missing some decimal points at the end, but 58+% of the content that we analyzed had no likes, no shares, no engagement. Literally nothing. No shares, no comments, no likes, no nothing. Just think about that. That means roughly 58% of the content that people are producing is being wasted in the abysmal. But what you see is the content that's getting engagement is rising to the top, whether you follow these people or not. That's how the algorithms work these days.
So Neil, you talk about kind of the quality versus quantity. I know one of the things we've been talking a lot about is, what's the infusion of AI mean? And, we were actually talking in a previous episode about kind of the balance between, does it actually decrease trust with people? Because now people don't really know where the information is coming from, or are there ways to use AI to also, increase trust just to get out there? Curious, you kind of mentioned the Opus clip and some of the shortcuts there, but that doesn't necessarily help. Just curious on your view of, AI and what impact that's going to play on the quality game.
I wish I had. I'm looking up to see if I have the chart on my phone, and it was like really interesting, in which we did a study to see how read time is affected the moment people think the article is written by AI. So when I said we did something that was interesting is we took content, none of it was written by AI, and for a portion of the content, it was just written by human. For another third of the content, we said written by AI, modified by human, and another third, it just said written by AI. But technically, the content was all written by a human. You get what I mean,
Oh,
right? We were just putting that
yeah.
just to see
Yeah.
if it affect read time and engagement. And I don't have the chart in front of me, but it was roughly when people thought it was just written by AI, even though it wasn't, the read time dropped by roughly half.
Not surprised.
It's kind of ridiculous.
Yeah.
I just think about that. It's the same article. It was really
Yeah.
written by a human.
Yeah.
Nothing changed other than just a little piece of blurb at the top said written by AI, written by human, written by AI, modified by human, right? Use one of those three options. And no joke, the read time decreased by roughly a half when it was written by AI. Written by AI, modified by a human had higher time than written by AI, but lower time than written purely by human.
Yeah.
Still kind of crazy. And I'm not saying people don't trust AI or not. That's just making conclusions based off the data that I'm assuming, and I don't want to go there. But what I could tell you is AI has less engagement when people believe or think it's written by AI. For whatever reason, I don't know yet, but we can all make assumptions, right?
Well, I think, one of the things we've talked a lot about with AI is a lot of times it lacks the soul.
Yeah,
right?
it lacks the soul and the heart, and you don't see it in the content, and that's just created.
So I feel it'll be interesting to see as we move forward, right? Like how AI will change relative to that about, getting better at the soul, at the feeling. I mean, I can't imagine how fast it's going to iterate and get better, but I think that's an interesting piece. I also think one of the things that we believe, I guess, right, is certainly AI for certain things, certain tactical things, I think can create a lot of efficiencies, but the reality is it's still artificial intelligence, right? So there's certain things it's going to do well, but there's certain things it's just not going to be able to sift through as well.
Yeah, and I think that technology is going to improve and it's going to get drastically better, but it's going to take a long time. And it's like when it first started coming to the market, there was a lot of iterations and improvements really fast. But I think to get that last 20%, 30% that you really need, it's going to take a really, really long time and it's going to be hard. And I'll give you a great example of this is there's a lot of misinformation on the internet. So Google has been trying to fix this forever.
Yeah.
What is real? What is false? And they haven't been able to fix it from day one. So how do you tell these AI platforms, don't crawl the stuff that has misinformation because we keep having new articles every day published that have misinformation? They don't exclude that. They don't know how to. It's almost impossible. I wouldn't say it is impossible. I would say it's almost impossible. So then you're going to end up getting AI being skewed and jaded. Look what happened with Google Gemini. It's also the people who code these things have input. Show me soldiers from German soldiers from World War II. They're using all this DEI stuff. And I'm not saying DEI is bad or good. I'm just saying there weren't.
It's not accurate.
It wasn't accurate, right?
Yeah.
And it's because human intervention, humans have opinions. And I'll give you another skewed viewpoint. And I'm not trying to get political here, but when COVID first came about, if you got vax or you didn't get vax, it was pretty polarizing, right? And people are like, oh, you didn't get vax, I'm not going to hang out with you. Or, oh, you're vax, you're silly. Why'd you end up getting a vaccine? You don't need it.
Yeah.
And again, I'm not a doctor. I'm not trying to give opinions on if the vaccine's good or not. But if you look at today's data, forget opinions. How many people do you actually know that get a vaccine booster or anything anymore? Like, I honestly really don't know anyone other than a few really old people that are in bad health. Like, I don't know anyone. You get what I mean, right? Like, even at this moment, I'm sick with COVID, right?
Oh, really?
Yeah. I literally just woke up out of bed for this recording. I was up earlier. I worked out at 4:30 in the morning. And then
Yeah.
when I was done, it was a short workout because I wasn't feeling well. 5:15 I finished. By the time it was 5:30, I was showered and everything, and then back in
Yeah.
bed, and then literally woke up at 6:55, knowing that I had this interview. But like
Wow.
the point I'm getting is, it's like, you know, even me, like, it's barely anything,
Yeah.
right? Like
Yeah.
slight
Yeah.
fever, sore throat, but like other than that, like I'm good to go.
Yeah.
Let's rock and roll.
I love it. Nothing's going to
That's
hold
cool.
Neil Patel back. Neil, I got to ask you. So we're talking about AI. One of the things I've noticed, I wrote another book recently, put it on Amazon. It seems like some platforms are trying to crack down on AI. Maybe Amazon being one of them. I've read different reports, but like you said, with misinformation, you don't know if it's opinion or fact based. That's one thing I've always
Yeah.
appreciated about your stuff is that it's factual, it's data based. And what's your take on AI content, whether it's copy, it's images, it's whatever, video? Are platforms, social media cracking down on AI content? It seems like it.
Yeah, so there's a purpose for it. Um, we are seeing it not do as well on these platforms. We don't necessarily see them cracking down on it. We see them just ignoring it because the engagement sucks. So
Yeah.
instead of saying this is AI or this is not AI, we think they're looking at it more as like engagement. The engagement sucks, show it less. Kind of like the example I gave you when it said written by human, written by AI, written by
Yeah.
human modified. I mean, written by AI, modified by AI. But there are purposes for it. So we work with a university called UTI, University of Technical Institute. We are able to drastically increase our search traffic by using AI to do research for all the cities around their campuses and then have humans go in and write content. So there are purposes for AI where it can help you make things more efficient. EX, speed up the process to do research and then
Mhm.
feed it to a human, and human can take that stuff and then go create content with it, but just double check and make sure it's factual and stuff like that, right? But the point I'm
Yeah.
getting is there's definitely a place for it. It's where in the process do you want to end up using it?
Yeah.
You
And
know,
it's interesting. Go ahead.
and one more quick example is in content. A lot of times we use it to translate and transcribe our content, but then what we'll do is we'll have humans go in and modify it all just to make sure it's accurate for that region. And they'll look at the original source and the transcribed version just to double check in case AI messed some crap up in there. And it does a lot of the time. When I say a lot of the
Yeah.
time, more than 50% of the time.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, the other interesting part I think about AI is what I've seen with people when they first kind of dive into it. It's information overload. It's kind of like I felt like where the internet was initially, where it was like information is at our fingertips, but you get so much information that it's not necessarily even as helpful. And so it'll be interesting to see, as to your point of the iterations of AI, of how it gets even more, even in the spaces that it does do a good job, how it gets more accurate and more pinpointed. Because I feel like, to your point of the accuracy is one thing, and then I feel like sometimes it takes so much interaction to get to where you need to be, that it's not creating as much efficiency as maybe some people think. But it's cool, right? It's interesting to use, right? So people kind of get addicted to it that way.
What's funny is yes, it's cool. For a lot of tasks, it can save people time, but for some tasks, it's funny because we have quite a bit of people that work for us. I've had people show me the cool stuff they did at AI, and they're like, "Look at this! I don't have to do this manually anymore." And I'm like, "Okay, but you're feeding all this information into the AI. You actually have to still do some manual processes and queries." I'm like, "So how much time did it take you?" And then they're like, "I don't know." And then I'm like, "Time it again." So then they do it again. And they're like, all right, it took 30 something minutes. Let's call it like 35, 36, 37 minutes.
Yeah.
It's somewhere in the 30 range. And then I was like, all right, now go do it with a different data set and do it by hand. And they did it by hand, and it took them like 18, 19 minutes. And I was like, cool. Yes, I get how it helped you out, but it took you longer to do it with AI than it just did for you to just do it.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that's all cases, that's just some cases, right?
Yeah, for sure.
In the event something takes longer, Neil, but the product, the output is better, and maybe it's only 25% longer, do you feel that's worth it in business?
Depends what it's for. If it's for something that doesn't really matter much, of then it may not matter. But if it's something like, hey, you need the data to be 100% accurate so you can make business decisions on. Yes, you want it to take 20% longer, double the time, as long as it's accurate, that's fine. You don't want to make decisions based off of bad data. Like, it really depends on the use case. But at the same time, if you're making a PowerPoint presentation and it makes your image look 25% better, or it makes your images look a little bit better, we've seen data on ugly PowerPoints and beautiful PowerPoints. If the content sucks, no one cares. If the content's great, even if the slides are ugly, it still does really well,
Yeah.
right? So, like putting a finishing touch and making it 10% better, but it taking 25% of the time for a visual aspect when the content's amazing isn't going to make much of a difference.
Yeah. Fascinating.
And we do webinars, no joke, 2 to 3 times a month, all PowerPoint driven. We use Restream for it. We blast it out to our audience. The number one thing, the number one thing that affects engagement and viewership is the title of the content and the quality of the content.
Some of that has to do with the speaker too, right? The person delivering the content, no doubt.
That has a huge thing too. Yeah, if some random people are speaking to someone versus someone well known, you're gonna get a lot less people potentially showing up compared to a well known person.
Neil, just to pivot a little bit, I know you've spoken on some of this and made content around this and things like that. I'm wondering if you could share a little bit about your journey, about just, how you got to where you are today, because, I think a lot of people look at successful people like yourself and say, I want to be like Neil. But, you've stacked a lot of wins over a lot of years, doing a lot of daily habits, daily behaviors to get to where you are today. And I think a lot of times people miss that. Just curious if you could kind of just walk us through kind of your journey and kind of some of the learnings you've had along the way.
Sure. So I think routine's really important, because it just keeps you going. If you don't have a routine, what are you going to do and what are you going to accomplish for the day? And then a lot of times your days are just unproductive. You can't buy back time no matter how much money you have. So for example, for me, I typically work out in the morning between 4 and 5-ish, and where I start, and then I'll work out for like 45 minutes. Then, I brush before I work out, and then I'll shower after I work out. From there, I answer emails, do phone calls, chill with friends and family throughout the day. A lot of my day is just meetings and phone calls, analyzing data and numbers, reviewing things, working on strategy. But I think routine is really important. Without that, it's just people don't have as productive days. The second thing that I would say is, over the years, I've really learned that it doesn't matter how smart you are. Like, hiring people from Harvard or Stanford doesn't mean that they're going to be successful. Execution or hustle is extremely important, and you can try to teach people it. Some people just naturally want to go, and some people don't. The next thing I would say is, this is the biggest lesson I learned in my entrepreneurial journey. Hire people who have done it before. So don't look at a resume from an aspect of a resume like, oh, let me see where you went to school or what was your GPA or any of that. We look at resumes from the aspect, and a lot of times just LinkedIn profiles. Where'd you work before? Was it a competitor? Did you climb the ranks, and have you done what we're trying to solve? And did you do that for 2 companies that are competitors? Because if you did it twice for 2 companies and you climbed the ranks, that means they found you valuable. Most people say they're valuable, but they're not getting promoted. When you keep getting promoted and you've been there for a while, that means a company finds you valuable. And if you've been at 2 of my competitors and the company finds you valuable and they're bigger than us, there's a good chance that you can probably help us grow too. And that's how we look at it.
What's up, listeners? We've got some exciting news. We're launching a community. It's a private Facebook group called the Strategic Sales Accelerator. And we'd like to invite you to be a part of this exclusive group of sales professionals, executives, and business leaders. Members of this group will gain access to exclusive content, trainings, and webinars. Our content is designed to help users gain clarity and connection to the result, build efficiency, and ultimately attract more qualified leads. build more authority, and generate more sales, all without sacrificing burnout. We understand that rising tides lift all boats. And if you're interested in being a part of a community that's as hungry as you are, I encourage you to check out the link below. It takes just less than a minute to apply. So what are you waiting for? Click the link below and jump in now. Now back to the show.
So, if you go back earlier in your career, so your habits today, right, are very well refined, right? Through, years of, could you speak to 10, 15 years ago, or, when maybe you kind of had that enlightening period of this is what my day needs to look like, and these are some of my core habits to drive success?
It wasn't a specific age, it was the size of the business. Once it starts getting bigger and bigger, you just find that more people doesn't mean more time. It actually means you're just busy and you're pulled in so many more directions, especially if you want to be hands-on and in the trenches. So you got to start setting up routines, because it just helps you become more efficient. So for example, I found that when I do intermittent fasting and I don't eat breakfast, I have more energy for some reason. I also don't drink coffee. I also found that when I get 8 hours of sleep, I do better, right? So I tend to just keep some of those things to make sure that I have time to not just work, but work productively. Same with text messages. If someone messaged me right now, I'll show you my screen. You can't actually see an icon for text messages. And it doesn't pop up on my notifications. Why? Because a lot of times texts don't need to be responded right away. If someone really needs to get a hold of me, they'll call me. Emails, I don't go check every single minute because you're just breaking routine and getting away from what you need to get done. And instead you're just checking email. Then you got to get back into the mode of trying to finish that task. So I'll block out time to check texts and emails as well.
Yeah.
Some discipline in there too. It's great to have routines, but you need to be disciplined.
Yes.
One of the things I've said about that, Neil, I'm nowhere near where you are, waking up at 4:30 or 5 in the morning, but I do have some similar routines in that. To me, part of it is it's a mindset. It's a want to, and I also tell people that doing these things fills my cup. So it might be selfishly getting up early to take care of myself so I can take care of other people, because I think if you fill your cup first, you can fill the cup of other people. And that allows me, when I sleep, take care of my eating, my health. I'm a better person for it at work, at home, with kids, family, etc. And I think that's a lesson that a lot of entrepreneurs sometimes learn too late, but nevertheless is an important one that everyone should hear.
Yeah, I agree with you. And you're so right. If you can't take care of yourself first, it's too hard to take care of others.
Yeah, and I think people see that, no doubt. Neil, I want to switch gears and talk about personal brand. And so often, you're the face of the business is named after you. But I tell a lot of people that, whether you want to be famous or an influencer, or you just want to rise the ranks and get a couple promotions, I think personal brand is absolutely critical to success, because like you said, someone goes to LinkedIn and they're vetting two candidates. Are they going to choose the guy or gal who's got 50 followers and hasn't updated their profile in 5 years? Or are they going to choose the person who's got 5,000 connections and has some content, has engagement, obviously cares about how they show up online? Can you talk a little bit about the importance of personal brand and where you see that, whether it's in marketing world, in, just for personal benefit and so on?
Yeah, so I think personal branding is huge, and it can help you get kickstarted. It can help you get promotions a little bit here. They were more so hired. I don't know if it really get you too many promotions. Um, Out of all my businesses, when I look at my personal brand drives a decent amount of revenue, but not much in the grand scheme. It drives less than 10%, and substantially less than 10%. So to give you an idea, my personal brand doesn't drive more than $10 million in revenue annually, right? From clients to speaking engagements, etc. It doesn't drive that much revenue. The corporate brand drives much more. You look at Kylie Cosmetics, from Kylie Jenner, one of the biggest personal brands out there. She did a great job. Not trying to knock her. She's done a much better job than I have in building a brand. But Kylie is nowhere near the size of L'Oreal or Estee Lauder. right? The personal brand only gets you so far. Kim Kardashian has a high valuation for some of her businesses. Her net worth is quite high and good for her. Again, not trying to knock her. Same with Rihanna. What are these companies really worth when they go public versus the private markets? Time will tell. And they've done extremely well, including them, LeBron James or Cristiano Ronaldo. But it just does not make the money that corporate brands do. You're better off spending your time building a corporate brand. Ideally, do both, but the corporate brands just make so much more money. Tony Robbins is one of the most famous people, but you know, he's no Jamie Dimon, right? Jamie Dimon makes more money working at J.P. Morgan than Tony Robbins does as an entrepreneur.
Yeah, that's a fascinating point because I can't help but think about a lot of the athletes. So Gary Vaynerchuk and other people have tried to help athletes create a personal brand so they can monetize that, whether it be through sponsorships or endorsements. So that that's kind of where my brain goes. But I guess you make a valid point. Something that I really hadn't considered is building a corporate brand is more powerful than building a personal brand.
And don't get me wrong, it's still valuable. Like look at Steph Curry or LeBron James or Michael Jordan. They've done exceptionally well. But again, the corporate brands like Nike make more money than the Jordans. And I would actually say out of all companies, Nike is probably, I know they're struggling right now financially. They still have money. That's not the issue, but their stock isn't performing as well. If you look at Nike, they've done one of the best jobs of building a corporate brand by leveraging personal brands. And that's really helped them grow the Nike brand more than anything else. The association with a lot of personal brands. Corporations are doing that and they have for ages. You look at those Maybelline commercials, they all have celebrities in it, right? You look at those perfume commercials, they all have celebrities. So these big corporations are leveraging personal brands to grow their corporate brand, but corporate brands just make more money.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I've seen a lot of people put borderline too much effort into building a personal brand only to not really have as much in return. But what would you say if someone wanted to or felt the need to build a personal brand? What are some of the more important things to focus on?
If you want to build a personal brand, you're going to have to do it through many, many years of hard work. You got to be consistent, like posting multiple times a day. You got to create content that other people have not seen before. Regurgitated content doesn't really help. And the fourth one is you got to pick a vertical. You can't just be famous for being famous. That's really hard. Like my vertical is marketing. Some people's vertical may be sales or fashion or whatever it may be. And the last one is you got to help people, and you got to do it from love, not help people because it helps build a personal brand. People see right through it.
I love that.
So true. So Neil, curious, as you've built your businesses, you kind of alluded to this, but just curious on your think pattern here. There's always a challenge as a leader of as your organization grows. How do you strike that balance between being call it in the weeds versus out of the weeds, right? Because to your point, you don't want to lose touch of the customer and where your brand is going and the value that you create. But at the same point, there's only so much time in the day. And when you have 1,000 people working for you, you can get pulled in a lot of directions really quickly. So curious just, how you've approached that as your businesses have grown to kind of balance those two.
Yeah. So you're saying, how do I balance getting pulled in multiple directions or?
Yeah.
I just have amazing leaders who run different divisions, so I don't get really pulled. It's extremely rare that I get pulled in multiple directions. I have laser focus, and I've hired an amazing team that knows how to run things if I was gone.
Fantastic. Love that.
That's the key to working on the business, not in the business. I love that. Neil, as you look at kind of taking that one step further, scalability, and not just so much for you, but for the listeners out there, there are so many folks that are focused and they want to scale their business. What I see is a lot of them don't really have a solid foundation, but for those who are really hungry, that have the hustle, what do you feel like is some of the best advice for helping scale a business?
We analyze some of the largest companies we work for, and when I say large, I'm not talking about like a billion in revenue. I'm talking about billions and billions and billions in profit, right?
Mhm.
Not one marketing channel even makes up 20% of their revenue. Heck, not even one channel makes up 10% of their revenue. Just being quite frank. Other than their brand and people just be familiar with it. That's actually the largest channel for these large corporations. And that is quite a bit higher than 10%, that specific channel, but I don't really consider that a marketing channel. I just consider that from being in business for a long time, creating good product and service. What we've seen is the way you scale and you build a big business is you have to take an omni-channel approach. As I mentioned earlier, people are on more than 6 social networks on average, and they're active on them, right? They may not log in every day to each of them, but they're still active. So if you're not on all the channels and the channels aren't working together to help you solve a specific mission, you're just not going to do as well. And you really need the focus there to be on a single mission. And when I say that is, if you can get if you can get the channels to work to either drive more leads or sales or help get more brand awareness, whatever your goals are, you'll find that you'll be much more effective. Because in marketing, they call it the rule of 7. When someone sees or interacts with your brand 7 plus times, they're much more likely to engage, evangelize a brand, and buy from you. And it's hard to do that if you don't take an omni-channel approach.
For sure. For sure.
Is there such thing as too many platforms in that case?
Yes, because a lot of the platforms your ideal customer is not on. For example, we don't use Snap. There's nothing wrong with Snap, but most of my ideal customers are not on Snap. Pick the platforms that are closest resemble your customers.
So along those lines of scaling a business, Neil, curious where you see the future of this going. The balance between sales and marketing, right? In a lot of organizations, there's this, call it division or battle or whatever of what
Yeah.
is sales, what is marketing, and things like that. And in today's world, where frankly, I think it's harder to touch someone in a non-digital way because I think people are better at hiding, for lack of a better way of saying it. Just curious where you see that going and kind of how to address that division that exists in so many companies.
Yeah, so I look at sales, marketing, product, customer service, etc. They all have to work together. And if they're not working together, you're just not going to have efficient operation. And sometimes you can combine certain divisions under one leader, sometimes you can't. But if they're not communicating with each other on a regular basis, like a weekly basis, on like here are the biggest issues, can people help solve them? And then they need to execute on them and try to solve them each and every single week. A business will grow faster. If they don't, then you're operating in silos. And if customer success or support keeps getting the same issue over and over again, like people are confused, maybe it's your marketing messaging and you should just fix that so people don't keep having those questions for customer support. But if you're not talking with each other, you're not going to be able to solve these problems and you're just not going to do as well.
How many businesses do you see either when they come to work with you or when you're talking to people out and about that are siloed? Because I do think that's a
Oh,
massive problem.
majority. Almost majority are siloed. Most of the companies we work with are really large publicly traded corporations, but majority are siloed. But they do a decent job of divisions communicating with other divisions every once in a while. People forget that if you're in a big market, you don't have to do everything right to build a big business. You don't even have to have the best product. Just, most big businesses have tons of average players. You need amazing leadership, but the people underneath them, and a lot of big corporations, they're just average. You can't hire all A players. It's just not possible.
We talk about that a lot.
Yeah, for sure.
So in that case, when you have teams that are working cross functionally, it probably feels very harmonious. What are some of the metrics that you and your team like to look at? Now, I know this could probably vary a lot from small business all the way up to your Fortune 500 clients, but what are important metrics, and maybe more importantly, what are some of the overlooked metrics? Because I think, for the average, let's just call it small to medium sized business, they could log into any platform right now and be inundated with data. And I've said things before like, I don't think half of this data is relevant. Now, it is relevant to a certain degree, but for the level of their understanding, it feels like there's only really a handful of data points they should be focusing on for small business.
Yeah, and it really varies business per business, but a lot of important metrics that people overlook is from visit to time of purchase, because that helps with cash flow. Knowing that number really can help you optimize your cash flow. The second one is LTV. A lot of businesses don't track that, especially that are small, and the ones that do, a lot of them have an inaccurate number of their lifetime value, right? LTV. And the third one that I say a lot of businesses also tend to ignore is conversion rate, visitor to a paid customer. And knowing these three metrics and focusing on improving all three really can drastically improve a business.
This might be too elementary for what you just said, but what about bounce rate? I feel like I've
And you
seen
can
some
just ignore
businesses.
it.
What's that?
I'm not saying it's not important, but for most businesses, they can just ignore it.
Interesting.
So Neil, as you've built businesses and curious, what's next? You seem like a guy that can't really sit still. So I'm just, curious, what do you see here in the future?
As I'm sitting here, my legs are fidgeting, funny enough.
Yeah.
I'm almost on my 7th year at NP Digital. October will be the 7th year, or we'll just have finished 7 this October. And have been having a fun journey. We'll continually do the same thing and grow and just keep buying up more businesses. There's not really much more. I enjoy what I'm doing. I love the team, and I'm happy with, my boring, ugly business.
I think from the outside looking in, nobody would call it that, but fair
No,
enough.
I think from the outside in, most people call it boring and ugly. To me, it's sexy. But
Yeah.
no, I love the team. I love the culture. I have fun what I'm doing, and the money is a byproduct of it.
Love that.
So, in your business, you've acquired, you've done a lot of these things, and clearly part of that is understanding the landscape of marketing, where the industry is now and where it's headed. How do you try to stay ahead of the curve? And it's probably easy for someone who lives and breathes marketing, much like I do. How do you stay ahead of it? And how do you know what's coming? Or do
I
you?
keep going to conferences, meeting new people, learn from them. I read a lot, and I do a ton of experiments, and my team does too, and we learn from our experiments, the winners and the losers.
Spoken like someone who really knows the hustle acronym, right? Right, Dustin?
That's right.
Well, so what do you like to read? What does reading for Neil Patel look like?
Well, I read everything. I don't read too many books. I read a lot of articles online. Like I'll read CNBC every day, Bloomberg, TechCrunch, Search Engine Land, Search Engine Journal, Ad Age, Ad Week. But I read quite a bit from that aspect. I probably spend a few hours a day at least reading.
I love that. I feel like that's one of the most important things any hungry entrepreneur or leader can do is just continue to read.
Yeah.
Sure.
Neil, I want to go back to something earlier. You brought up lo-fi and hi-fi content. Mostly we're talking about lo-fi. I had written a marketing book recently, so pretend to be impressed. And one of the things that I referenced was mid-fi. Now, I've not heard anyone else use the phrase. I'm sure it's been used before, but we were talking really about quality and quantity. And you mentioned that people love the lo-fi stuff because it's casual, it's easy, it typically doesn't come off as salesy. Whereas I feel like a podcast like this is possibly more mid-fi, where it tends to have a little more post-production, a little more editing, but yet it's not what I would call hi-fi agency level. So, is there really a such thing as mid-fi content? And what is the balancing act? Because I think even for Fortune 500s, we're starting to see companies like, Loom deodorant. They've made themselves famous, and they're taking what is essentially iPhone video and putting it into a television commercial. And we're seeing other D2C companies do this as well. What's your take on that?
Yeah, so I do think there is a thing called mid-fi. But even with lo-fi content, a lot of times you still need to edit it. And whether you want to call that mid-fi or lo-fi, usually most content is edited either way. Um, I'm with you. This could be called mid-fi. This could be called lo-fi. It is more highly produced than lo-fi, so I'm with you on the mid-fi. And the way I really do see it is whether it's mid-fi or lo-fi, it just converts really well, and you do need to edit here and there and slice and dice. But hi-fi just doesn't work as well.
The kid's going to make a cameo on the podcast?
Oh, they are about to. Although they just ran away.
Wouldn't be the first time on the Hustle Nation podcast.
Yeah.
That's right. All right. So Neil, if people want to kind of find you, engage with you, what are ways that they can, because Chris and I have talked a lot about, we've followed you for a long time, gained a tremendous amount of insight. What's the best ways to kind of track you?
NeilPatel.com, NeilPatel. My social handles are all mainly Neil Patel. And my ad agency is NP Digital.
Neil, I got to ask you one last quick question on my list here. I forgot about this one.
Go for it.
For marketers or small businesses out there on a shoestring budget, which is a lot of them, what are maybe 2 or 3 tactics that they should be using that maybe they're not using right now that will help generate results?
They shouldn't look at it that way. They should look at it.
They made it.
Yeah, they made it. You should end up looking at it from an aspect of, say hi, kids. So they should end up, hi. They should look at it from an aspect of spaghetti. You throw it against the wall and you see what sticks. When you're strapped for a budget, you don't need to do everything. You just need to end up focusing on, you need to end up focusing on what's hot versus, or not what's hot, sorry. Look, my kids are distracting a little bit. But you need to focus on, you need to end up focusing on what's sticking to the wall and what's working. So there's too many tactics out there. You're not going to be able to do all of them. So what you want to do is try a few of them, see which one's working the best, double down on it, and ignore the rest. Once you've maximized that strategy and the tactic, then slowly start adding more and more. But start with 1 or 2 and literally just see what sticks and what you can scale up and get working as quick as possible. So it's not really necessarily one tactic or strategy that they should focus on first. It's more of experimentation. But the problem we see with startups is they try to do all of them, and that's just what crushes them over time, especially at the beginning when they're strapped for a budget.
I love it. Neil, that was great. This is a great time to wrap it up. Kids, thanks for making the cameo. You guys are going to be in the podcast. We're not going to edit that out.
Yeah, you can keep them on. I don't mind at all. But just don't push the power button.
I just want to say, hey, thanks for being on the show, Neil. This was an awesome conversation. Glad we got to meet the kids. For all the listeners out there, thanks so much for tuning in to another episode. Do not forget to check this man out, neilpateldigital.com. Until next time, peace.
Sounds good. Thanks, guys.
Thank you for being part of the Hustle Nation. If you're serious about raising the bar in your personal and professional life and willing to go all in on your success, head over to hustleleaders.com. Here you can get access to our Hustle Productivity ebook, attend our Hustle Masterclass, or challenge yourself to the 30-day Hustle Challenge. Pairing these tools and training with the Hustle Nation podcast will help you advance to a whole new level. Until next time, stay hungry and inspire those around you to hustle.